Hey everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we're looking back on a material that we've looked at many years ago, and we had the opportunity to revisit again recently with the loan of the Fab Sega DLP ecosystem. Not to mention, of course, that resin printers have come a very long way since we last looked at it, and last time when we looked at power resin materials, we grouped them together in one big video, and it really didn't give this material enough spotlight. So this is going to be a re-review in more modern context. So this is just a quick recap of the Fab Sega. If you didn't watch that video, you should go watch it regardless. It is a higher end DLP printer designed to work exclusively with power resin materials. Resins such as power resin RTV, wax, burn, opaque, zero, and their new one called vintage. The Sega comes preloaded with perfectly tuned resin profiles for maximum print quality, print time, the entire gamut. If you really enjoy using power resin materials, then this is the perfect machine for you for those materials. Now the machine isn't cheap, of course, you're going to be paying for it, but I mean, go check out that video anyway and see for yourself. Officially on the Power Resin website, Power Resin Dark has been developed specifically for direct casting of jewelry. It provides perfect casting quality combined with very sharp printing abilities and is easy to set stones. Now, with that statement of set stones, I'm not entirely sure if they're referring to stone in place casting. On their website, you do see a model with stones set into it. I think what the original intent of Dark was that your stone settings, as they are printed, are very accurate. You're not going to see very much shrinkage. They're going to be exactly the way you want them to be. Not necessarily that they're designed for stone in place. This material is particularly rigid. So I feel like if you were to force a stone in, the prongs won't bend, they might just snap off. Now, I'm not an expert in this. We're going to refer back to that statement that I made in the Power Resin Vintage video, where we're not experts in stone in place casting. We're going to do an entire video on that in the near future, so make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss it. I do feel like if the model is calibrated well enough, you could probably fit a stone and do stone in place casting in the resins with pretty much any resin, honestly. If it's designed well enough, anything should work. We've tried this, we've started this video, by the way, and it does work with some that are not advertising that they can actually do stone in place casting. So we're going to come back to that. As we can see here, Dark definitely excels at printing extremely fine models. This particular one is well, it's supposed to be a bracelet, but printing on the Sega, it was actually too large at 100% scale to, fit on the bed because it's such a small machine. This one is scaled down, so this is more like a baby bracelet. And as I was uniformly scaling it, that means that overall, the attachment points are now much, much smaller. I believe I had to scale it down to about 60%. So what would have been maybe a 0.4 millimeter connection point in this grid is now more like 0.1, and that's still printed exceptionally well on the Fab Sega in Dark. So this material is specifically designed for printing ultra detail. Now beyond that, we've tried firsthand and we've seen many others using it for pretty much everything. Printing and casting heavy rings, miniatures, ultra thin filigree models, and so on. Doesn't seem to be an end to how good it can handle all of these different situations. We printed our standard array of test models here with a steadily increasing number of supports, starting with a 1 millimeter support, a single one underneath at the lowest point, and then gradually adding more to the point where it just looks absolutely ridiculous and it would be very considered over supported. We ran these print tests on the Fab Sega, obviously. We had excellent print results right here, but we also ran them on the Prusa SL1S and the Sonic Mini 8KS. On the Prusa in particular, a lot like when we were first looking at this material, this is where we had the most issues. And one of the big weaknesses of Dark seems to be bed adhesion. And I believe in particular it was bad on the Prusa because that one's build plate is just a smooth sandblasted surface. It doesn't have all those laser etched designs that are now on most of the modern machines that you can buy today. So I did have some bed adhesion problems on the Prusa, but I did not have any issues on the Sonic Mini. and I definitely had no issues on the Sega either. Another thing that's changed quite a bit since the last time we were looking at this material is the introduction of NFAP or PFA materials versus the generic FEP foils that we had way back when. Now, I don't feel like Dark has much adhesion to pretty much anything. If it's not sticking to the build plate, it's not really sticking to the FEP either. When Dark is printing on any printer, I don't hear any of those little telltale pops. You know, it's not lifting and I can't hear it. So I don't feel like there's much of any FEP adhesion going on, and I believe it's just gotten better now with the introduction of PFA and NFEPs. In addition to that, I don't think you'd be able to find a printer today that doesn't have a monochrome LCD panel. And of course, compared to 5 or 6 years ago, the UV LEDs are also much more powerful. So effectively, we've halved our print time. I believe when we first tested this, it was on the SL1S, and it had an RGB screen and a pretty poor excuse for an LED. Last time, in terms of layers, our burn-in time was around 60 seconds or more, with a 10 to 12 seconds per layer, making a plate of rings basically an overnight process. Thankfully, that's a thing of the past, and we're now looking at around 30 seconds for base layers and around 5 to 6 seconds in terms of layer times on the Prusa, and even less on the Frozen. Since this isn't a formula revision or anything, we really shouldn't expect any different casting results compared to last time. The big difference is that we've made huge strides in our testing and video making process, so we can do a much more direct comparison with many of the other resins that we've tried. Avid users of Power Resin will be happy to hear that we've kind of changed up our casting tests as well. They're a little bit different. From now on, we're going to be doing a 6-hour rapid burnout to start, followed by a standard burnout. The logic being that if it doesn't perform well in the rapid burnout, it'll perform better in the standard. If it performs well in rapid, it's going to perform even better in the standard. So then we don't have to move on. So our first test, and the only one we really had to do because the casting results were great, we did a rapid burnout using Optima Prestige mixed to 36 to 100 for 6 hours. And Dark handled this rapid burnout perfectly without well, there are a couple of blemishes on the really heavy ring, but on everything else, it's perfect. If you're casting smaller than this, then you know you can get away with a 6-hour rapid. If you're casting larger, then you need to add more time when you're using Power Resin Dark. These casting results are very similar or exactly the same as our recent review of Bluecast X1 V2. It's also the same as Monocure Burnaway, and it's also the same as Vintage. So it's actually pulling its weight really, really well. So where would I rank Power Resin Dark? Well, I can't really tie it with Power Resin Vintage because of the fact that it's probably not going to cast heavy things as well or as easily using a rapid burnout. This big tunnel that we're going to be submitting, it's actually like an 80 millimeter thing for a lobe. This was cast in Vintage, and it was a rapid burnout, and it came out flawlessly. So I don't feel like if it's going to have problems with a large signet ring, that it's going to be able to handle this one. And again, where Dark is claiming that you can do stone in place settings, I would still lean more towards Vintage because it's slightly more flexible, and this one doesn't seem to have that same property. So I would just give it a little bit more towards Vintage in that regard. But if you need your stone settings to be the perfect size and you're going to be doing traditional stone setting, then by all means, Dark is still an excellent choice. Another factor is that where Dark excels at doing filigree stuff, we also managed to get the same prints out in Vintage. So both of these materials are really pulling their weight, but I would still recommend Dark if you're aiming to do, a baby filigree bracelet. Overall, Power Resin Dark is a joy to use. As soon as you overcome that bed adhesion thing, it prints perfectly every time. We didn't have a single print failure when it came to the single supports on any of the machines. So this material is incredibly reliable. As soon as you get the bed adhesion, you're set. Power Resin really hit the perfect, almost perfect formulation really, really early on in the resin printing game. And I'm really glad to see that they've continued producing it. And no doubt there's lots of people out there who've been using it for many years with fantastic results. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think we're going to actually have to start changing our ranked list because we're starting to diversify like the resins. They're all casting well, but they tend to be more aimed at a certain niche of jewelry. For example, you wouldn't see Bluecast X1 printing this. It's so thin. But at the same time, you wouldn't see Power Resin Dark printing a monster thick bracelet covered in surface designs. That's more a Bluecast X1 thing because it can melt. So we're going to start seeing categories where they start to do one thing exceptionally well. And I feel like this one, Power Resin Dark and Vintage, go into that stone setting, high accuracy, filigree category, and not so much the print heavy, cast big, sculptural side. So that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you're okay with, looking back on a material. Again, I don't feel like this material got enough of a spotlight the first time we looked at it. So, in a more modern context in 2024, it was worth re-looking at, and I'm really happy that we're able to look at it with the Sega and of course on the other machines as well. If you need any help with printing or casting, consider joining our membership program, where you'll have access to me on a more one-on-one basis for assistance on our Discord channel, and we can talk with like-minded folks to bounce around ideas and projects that you might be having. If you have any hurdles that you want to overcome, then this is a really great place to talk about that stuff and share. So that's all for this video. I will see you guys in the next one.